Well, speaking of what Donald Trump is doing, I want to bring to your attention two trends that are taking place under his order. The first is his removal of Fed Governor Lisa Cook. President Trump for what she called unprecedented and illegal efforts to remove her from the central bank. Now, just as a bit of context here, President Trump has claimed that Fed Governor Cook has falsified her mortgage documents and therefore is unfit to be at the Federal Reserve. Ms. Cook was appointed a governor of the Federal Reserve in 2022 by President Joe Biden. She was the first African-American woman to serve in the role, actually first African-American, period. Her term was due to end in 2038. She previously served under President Barack Obama's Council of Economic Advisors and worked at the U.S. Treasury. And like I mentioned, she is now suing Trump for her dismissal. What is going on? What is your reaction to this saga?
Well, I think Mr. Trump is busy firing huge numbers of people and replacing them with people that are more sympathetic to his policies, his viewpoints, his prejudices, and I include that word intentionally. So I'm not surprised, nor am I surprised that the reason is very trumped up, if I may be allowed the pun. Very trumped up. I have no idea what Ms. Cook's problems with her mortgages were, but it is not at all uncommon to fill out mortgage documents with a certain, freedom. You're trying to get a mortgage and you then stretch things. She may have done, who knows? But that using that as a ground to have the president interfere in an unprecedented way in that agency of the government, that's an incredible stretch. You wonder, wow, you couldn't come up with something better than that? Wow. And for me, let me interject a parallel. I'm a graduate of Harvard University. Was there at Harvard anti-Semitism when I spent my 4 years there? Yeah, a little. But by my experience, and I'm born and raised and worked in the United States all my life, the amount of anti-Semitism I ever noticed at Harvard was much smaller than I noticed at countless other institutions and places in American society. If you were really interested in dealing with anti-Semitism, which is, by the way, much less of a problem now than it was when I was a college student, I would give you 10 places you could go and look at it. But he didn't do that. He goes to Harvard, against whom he has Harvard grudges for a long time, goes after other universities on the grounds of their inadequate attention to anti-Semitism. I mean, these are arguments that are made up. This is childishly transparent. So the answer is, he wants, as we all know, it's almost as though he wants us to see that the arguments don't matter. We all know he's been screaming at Mr. Powell to lower interest rates. The whole world has been watching that soap opera for months. And now he can maybe get around Mr. Powell, whom he can replace in a few months anyway, because Powell's term is over in May. But he's in a rush. He's so worried about the damage to be done to the American economy by his tariffs that he will be blamed if a recession comes, that he needs to preempt it by lowering interest rates. Getting rid of Ms. Cook is simply a cheap, easy way to do it, and citing her mortgage. I mean, it's so transparent, it's offensive if he actually believes the rest of us are so stupid as to take seriously what he's doing.
Well, let's just take a step back and look at what is about to happen. What would happen to the Federal Reserve and ultimately monetary policy and the economy if Trump were successful in his attempt to replace Fed governors with those who are more loyal to him and his cause?
All that would happen is that the normal activities of the Federal Reserve, and let's remember, it's in order to, their job is to control the quantity of money and the terms upon which money is borrowed and lent. And the purpose of that control is to give us stable prices and as close to full employment as they can get us. That's their charge. That's what they would continue to do. But with this change, they would now be much more quickly subservient to whatever the president in power wants than they have been. They have tried very hard in the 100+ years that the Federal Reserve has been with us to function like central banks are supposed to, independent of the coming and going of political parties. Their job, I won't repeat what I just said, price stability, high employment, and all we're going to see now is that is going to be compromised by getting a politician out of a jam. If a recession threatens, well, then get me out of that problem. Mr. Trump seems to have a clear idea. Lord knows where he gets it, but he seems to have a clear idea that a recession is a bigger danger to him than an inflation. Between you and me, I don't agree with that at all, but he thinks so. And so he's now going to manipulate the Federal Reserve in a way no president before quite dared to do to get his outcome. Here's the irony, David. You and I have this conversation. Let's assume he succeeds. He gets rid of Cook. He puts in his own people. Then he gets rid of Powell, puts in more of his own people, has a majority, runs the Fed, lowers the interest rates, and it contributes to a runaway inflation. Mr. Trump will be out of office because of the inflation, and the only ironic twist will be his interest rate depression brought about the horrible inflation that drove him out of office.
Let's just, hypothetically speaking, take a look at this anti-establishment narrative here. What if we were to have a non-independent Federal Reserve? In other words, what is wrong fundamentally with having a Fed that is controlled by the White House or Congress? Would it not make the cohesion of fiscal and monetary policies a little bit more streamlined? Would it not make the country's economy easier to control and steer?
I don't think so. And the reason is I really do know the economics. It's my job. We don't know. And the we, I'm including me. We don't know whether the economy at this point is somehow more likely to tilt into a recession or into an inflation or into the stagflation, which is the combination of both of them. We don't know. It is therefore very important that different groups of people weigh in with different ideas about how that's working out, both before it begins to happen and as it unfolds, not because one or the other is right or wrong, but because the difference is crucial to coming up with a better decision than you might make if you excluded one voice. We now have a Congress that debates. Do we need to do this? Is a recession coming? Do we do something? They can make a statement. They can make decisions about spending money. They can make decisions about borrowing money. And they act. The Senate does. The president, the executive branch, does. Well, we also created an independent central bank called the Federal Reserve in order that it also, without the pressures of politics, does that. The problem with the Congress is when they discuss interest rates, they are not just discussing it the way the central bank does, what's good for the economy as a whole. The people in Congress are subject to enormous pressure lobbyists, donations from people who have a private interest in lower interest rates. The real estate industry, of which Mr. Trump is a representative, they always want lower interest rates because it makes it cheaper for people to buy real estate, since everybody virtually buys it on time, and therefore the mortgage rate will come down, housing construction will be. We don't want that to be the only determinant. We don't want that. We want there to be people weighing in on the conversation, not because they have a private profit motive, but because they have other considerations. That's the whole logic. Otherwise, we wouldn't need a central bank. Look, there was a part of the 19th century when we didn't have a central bank. President Andrew Jackson got rid of the Bank of America. We had one. Like they have a Bank of England or a Bank of France or a Bank of Italy. But he got rid of it in the name of libertarian private enterprise, blah, blah, blah. And for some years, for some decades, we didn't have a central bank. And the level of monetary chaos, that's why we started calling them panics. The Panic of 1837, the Panic of 1853. And after a while of that, we brought back in central banking, ultimately with the Fed at the beginning of the 20th century, because the alternative was too chaotic, leaving it to the private profit-driven motivations. We're losing that again. And there is no reason, no evidence that that's a good idea. The evidence is it's convenient for Mr. Trump's idea of what his economic problem is, and he's in a hurry to fix it. That's not a basis on which we ought to allow such decisions to be made.
Another development I'd like to get you to comment on is the government participating in acquiring shares of companies. Just last week, the U.S. government has taken a 10% stake in Intel. Intel shares actually rose about 6% on the trading day last Friday. It's said that the government will also have a warrant to buy an additional 5% of Intel shares if the company is no longer a majority owner of its foundry business. Intel said that the U.S. government won't have a board seat or other governance rights. The Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, commented that this is part of the overall government strategy to secure chips ownership as part of the CHIPS Act. Trump has said recently, though, this week that I will make deals like that for our country all day long, he said on Truth Social. I will also help those countries that make such lucrative deals with the United States. I love seeing their stock price go up, making the USA richer and richer, more jobs for America. Who would not want to make deals like that? Trump added that stupid people are upset with a move that he said will bring more money and jobs to the U.S. Professor Wolff, are you part of the stupid people, quote unquote, that Trump has said doesn't like this plan?
One of us is, either Mr. Trump or the rest of us. In any case, let me respond. This is a momentous decision. He may have gotten it out of that sad executive whom he tried to get fired from his job. As we saw a couple of weeks ago, for those of us who pay attention, he impugned that guy's loyalty. The CEO of Intel, the guy had to go and beg to be left alone. He had to go to the White House and all the rest of it. And now we see what it is he agreed to, and what may have been the purpose of impugning his loyalty, namely to get the 10%. There is a definition of fascism that comes out of the experience of Germany and Italy. And here's the definition for those who may never have learned it. It's when the top levels of the corporate capitalist system merge with the top levels of a particular political party. Mussolini's party in Italy, Adolf Hitler's party in Germany. They merged the two step by step, company by company, so that the government could be a powerful force shaping what the companies do and vice versa. This was done in the case of Germany, the history I know real well. German is my first language. I speak it. I studied it. My mother was born in Berlin. I mean, I was born in the United States, but my mother was German. I know this history. The Association of German Industries invited Hitler to become the next chancellor. And the leader of Germany invited Hitler to take power in January of 1933. And he proceeded to bring together the peak, Spitz in German, the peak of German industry, together with the leadership of the Nazi Party. Anyone who knows that history, and of course here in the United States, we benefit from not knowing it, but anyone who knows that history would think long and hard about what Mr. Trump just did. That he is glad to make such deals tells you only about his ignorance, nothing else. Now let me tell you why it's a problem. Every other company in distress, particularly if it's a large company, can and will now go to the government to get bailed out. That's what this is. The government is injecting, if you read the details, $9 billion of our tax money is being handed over to the board of directors of Intel to use as they see fit. Wonderful for them. They now have money with which to try to fix that company, which, by the way, needs fixing. Its stock price is low. It has had problems, etc., etc. So now let's try to understand. If you're a difficult company, you're not going to figure out necessarily how to improve your technology, how to get a new market. There's another way to solve your problem. Go to Mr. Trump, who has just invited you. Come so I can make a deal. Let me give you a second example. When a union strikes, when the union at Intel, it has 100,000 workers. When the union strikes, it will be striking the government. Will Mr. Trump call out the army the way he is against the cities of Chicago, New York, LA, DC? Are we going to see more and less government ownership? Will Mr. Trump start firing people on the board the way he is at the Fed, because the share the government has is a dominant share? Whether they have a seat on the board or not is friggin' irrelevant. They will have the power that goes with it. If you don't do what the government wants, it'll sell those shares, and that will depress the price of your stock right into the toilet, and you will not be able to function. And you're the CEO, you'll know it. You know what's happening? The fascistic merger of the corporate and the political party top, and we're all watching what is going to be a very dangerous day.
You call this fascist, but how is this fundamentally different from what China has been doing for the last many decades? How is this different from, let's say, Canada, for example, which has state-owned pension funds investing large numbers of shares in public companies, for example?
It's a very, very good question. If the company is continuing to use the basic capitalist structure, the division of the people in an enterprise between the employers who run it and the employees who do the work, then we call that state capitalism. The government is becoming an employer, and the employer is becoming the government. Does that exist in other societies? Absolutely. In some more, in some less. One of the differences, though, if you want to look at China, is what is the use or the purpose of doing this? In the third world, what we used to call the third world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, the official, the ostensible, the reason they give, and that's more or less true, is to raise their societies out of the poverty that is their number one goal. So they mobilize their resources. China's a perfect example. They divided their country roughly in half. Half of it is private enterprises, and half of it is government enterprises. And they all use the employer-employee capitalist model. But China's number one boast is it lifted 800 million people out of poverty in the last 25 years. Notice what Mr. Trump says. Is this a way to really help the mass of the American people? Not at all. He says that right away, it's going to make us richer. The stocks went up. Yeah, that's the point. It's not that there isn't a similarity. It's what it is used to do. Here it is used, and we go back to the beginning of our talk today, it's used to deepen the inequality of our society. Otherwise, you wouldn't help Intel with $9 billion. You know what you'd use the $9 billion for? To help the people at the bottom. That would lift them up. And by the way, the money you give them at the bottom, they would spend. And what would they spend it on? The goods and services capitalists produce. You know what you might call that? Trickle-up economics. It's the alternative to trickle-down. Fascism is when you organize the economies to make those in charge even richer than they would have been without it. And you then assert, Mr. Trump isn't smart enough to do this, but you then assert, it's good that we do it, it'll trickle down. It will mean jobs in America. If you know what Intel is, you will know that it is a highly capitalized enterprise. It will not produce very many jobs, and there are dozens of ways to use the same amount of money to produce way more jobs than giving it to Intel will ever generate.
On your trickle up philosophy, how would giving money to the lowest wage earners help invigorate the economy?
Here's how it works. You take your $9 billion. You give it to Intel. The first thing Intel does, shareholders, is take a number of steps to improve the salary packages for their top executives. The second thing they do is take a number of steps to improve the dividends they pay to their shareholders to keep them happy. The last thing they do is give money to their employees. You could take the $9 billion. Why don't you short circuit the process? Give it directly to the employees. You know what then happens? They spend every nickel because they're poor. They don't have any money to save. They can't meet their needs as it is. That's why you help them. And you get the benefit, which all economics teaches, that if you give money to poor people, they spend it. And if you give money to rich people, they don't.
If you give money to the poor people, they would quit their jobs, and this is just a theory, they would quit their jobs and Intel wouldn't have any employees to run the business, and the business would collapse. How would you respond to that theory?
You give them a pay for a job. If that's your problem, give them the job that they want. We have 10 million people, conservatively estimated, 10 million people without a job. Create 10 million jobs, make them pay well. These people will be beating, I'll introduce you to my students. They'll be lined up to get these decent jobs that are secure government jobs. That's what they want. They will come and they will respond, and they will spend every nickel, and that will give much more of a boost to the economy, that trickling up, than giving it to the richest people in America, the corporate executives who we know spend their time figuring out how to, quote, save on labor costs because it's what makes your business more profitable. That's not what we need. What Mr. Trump is doing is giving it to them because he's them and they're him. But that's not the solution to our problem. And in the end, The growing problems of this society will undo Mr. Trump long before he will undo them.